Welcome. Welcome to Yoga Church. Welcome to our exploration into the non-dual teachings. As we've been saying, welcome into our exploration of non-conceptual reality. So, there's a teaching, there's words with the teaching, but we remember that those words are pointers. And I have some sharings here today, some quotes. About the silence, and the silence being that supreme teacher, and giving ourselves to that silence more and more. And I'm also going to talk some today about some falling away, some dissolving that can be nice guideposts of progress. Part of that is a quieting of the mind. And in that quieting of the mind, there's more silence. And in that silence, the truth is exposed more and more fully. This silence isn't just an audible silence. It's a silence of the mind. It's a quieting in the mind. It's been seen throughout time, throughout teachers and teachings. We'll talk some about that, but just opening up more to that silence and allowing what is here naturally to show. And it's a subtractive process. We're not adding. Teachers are used as pointers which go in and they dissolve misunderstandings. Misunderstandings aren't a problem, they're just something that's arisen, and then we have an opportunity now to look into those, see what's more real. Sometimes these meetings are called satsang, or from ancient times, satsang. Sat, meaning truth. Recently heard another interpretation or translation of sat. Just beingness. Beingness. Same. Truth and beingness. And then sang being that meeting or that coming together, satsang being that meeting or coming together in truth. We've talked some about what's real, what's known as real, and we're going to that deepest reality here. Appearances have a reality of their own, and a dream has a reality of its own, and a thought has a reality of its own, but we're going for this deepest reality that permeates all of space and time. That real. So this is a meeting that's dropping into that more and more fully. Giving less attention to the appearances and giving more attention to what is always here, always present. Satsang. non-duality. So let's give a moment to fall into more of this space of a non-dual approach to life, non-dual perspective, and we'll just think about two things. So just have 2 pointers here, and one of them being the witnessing presence. So there's this witnessing presence, and that is given more attention. So it's not the objects arising, but it is what is aware of the arising. And then also an allowing. So we've talked some about that, and we also talked some about that the allowing is almost a welcoming. So there's not this pushing away. There's the, as it allows, it's all part of life unfolding, and we are not going to go to battle with it. We just allow the unfolding to happen, and this is part of the creating space for presence to shine more fully in the life. So we can take a few deep breaths, have some deep sighs if we need. And just, it's allowed. And there's meditation practices of observing the breath, the breathing in and the breathing out, and the observing of the breath coming in and feeling into the nostrils and the lungs expanding and contracting in this movement, the observing of all that. And it's nice because it's not giving attention to the mind and mental processes. We're giving attention to this. We could give attention to a mantra. We could just give attention to what's allowing, but we're also here learning to give attention to that which is aware of all of this. So not just observing the breath, observing maybe that the mind is becoming more quiet, but observing also that there's an awareness of that witnessing presence. The witnessing presence isn't an object that we can take a hold of. But is it here? Is there a witnessing presence? Getting to know that more and more. I'll talk some today about this wonderful modern teacher, Swami Sarvapriyananda, and he's been in California. He's the head of the Vedanta Society in New York. Their first center there in Manhattan, and Um, right now he's touring some, and he's been in California and talking about consciousness, just enjoying talking about consciousness some, and how there's scientists, neuroscientists that are really interested in discovering the nature of consciousness. They have a plethora of theories. And then so he was sharing some understanding that's been around since ancient times. We can talk about them like pointers, right? These pointers. And then we observe. We recognize over and over that there is awareness there. Francis Lucille likes to say, what is hearing these thoughts, or not these thoughts, what is hearing these sounds, what is observing these thoughts. Ramana Maharshi says, who are the thoughts arising to? And nobody's asking for a conceptual answer to this. We just let the question drop us into contemplative space that doesn't need to come up with answers, but is just observing. Is there awareness here? Is it a different awareness that's aware of sounds? It's aware of thoughts? It's aware of a dream that happened in the nighttime? It's aware of memories that arise? It's aware of imaginations of the future? Is it a different awareness? Or is it just awareness? One of those properties Swamiji pointed to was ever present. And again, this isn't a new understanding, it's an ancient understanding. It's still true today. It can still be investigated by anybody. It's not hard. It's always here. Awareness. I keep calling it that golden thread. Just stay with that. In this allowing, there's not the needing to do something. If a thought arises, it's seen. If a sensation happens in the body, it's felt. We might even have an opportunity today to deepen even more into the the non-dual nature of existence. Because there's definitely a non-dual nature of presence, this unchanging nature, this ever-present nature. But also there can be a witnessing. If there's a witnessing, there's a feeling of two. And can even open more into like an unfolding in life. But an unfolding in life even has hints of time inside of it. So we can even go beyond that. So we will also just continue to allow a opening and a greater spaciousness to present itself into life itself. Oh, this non-dual meditation, we can take time for it again anytime. When we wake up in the morning, just take a moment and see that awareness is there. Or we go to meet with somebody, take a moment and see that awareness is there before we get on a phone call, seeing that awareness is there before we answer an email, or we go to bed at night, when we finish our day, before we eat our meals, taking moments. And the more that we do that, the more that this becomes more and more part of life. And the more the entangling with life just falls away. So, just to mention a little bit of what we've talked about recently and then go into more of what we're sharing here today. These two nice things we've talked about recently were inside of allowing what comes unasked is meant for me. So hopefully that's been deepening. What comes unasked is meant for me. And I know that's not a common approach to life, and what we're taught to how to approach life, but just feeling that more and more in life. Trusting space, a trusting of the absolute, a taking care of life that's happening. And then we also talked about in this allowing God's will be done. God's will be done. Part of what happens in this is it becomes more of a thing naturally as the identities fall away, as the me and my story falls away. As the me and my story falls away. Now, I know how that can be frightening, letting go of the me and my story. We can look at what's frightened by that. We can just observe if there's a constriction around that. I promise, inside of Ramana, there was not much of a me in my story, and inside of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and the Buddha, me in my story. So I want to just imagine for a moment, and I know in the end, we want to know the truth directly. But maybe it can be nice to just do this little imagining of the way things might be. I've enjoyed reading stories of sages and saints and seeing how things might be. And then, of course, there's sharings that happen here around these understandings that are there. So let's just take a moment to rest in that. And so if an imagining happens, we're just kind of opening up to a possibility in this imagining. And in the end, we don't want to have the imagining be our foundation. We want our direct experience to be our foundation, but let's just imagine for a second. Imagine that all there is consciousness. Consciousness is all there is. Everything is an arising in that and a falling back into that. There's just this pure potential. Everything arises and falls back into. It's behind everything. This is like that movie screen metaphor that we have talked about some, and that movie screen allows it all to happen. It's always there before the movie, after the movie. Consciousness, always there before the me, after the me, before the story, after the story. Consciousness, awareness, presence. Feels in a way like the fabric of space and time, but also beyond space and time, right? So it is what space and time arises in, but it is like that. It is that, like the sky, right? That infinite space that the clouds appear in and fall back away into. There's fundamentally that, and that if there's fundamentally that, if that is what everything is, then that is what you are, that is what this is, that is what everything fundamentally is. It's not separate. There's no separateness. This is what has been shared throughout time and what's continuing to be shared here. But it can feel like it's not that way, right? We feel the separateness. So I want to talk a little bit about that separateness, but first I wanted to point to, I had a couple quotes here. Different masters talking about this, including these two here. But first, I don't know if I'm saying the name right, but Ibn Arabi, and also known as the Great Master, a Sufi mystic from the 12th and 13th centuries. And he says, there is nothing in existence but God. There's nothing in existence but God. He is the seer through every eye. So recognizing that there is the multitude, but recognizing fundamentally that there is that behind it. He is the seer behind every eye. Through every eye. Behind every eye. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa here, who I look forward to sharing more about. A great master from the 1800s. We only have 3 photos of him because he was just in that time when photographs were just starting to be a thing. But we're lucky we have 3 photos of him. And Swami Sarvapriyananda is he's of the Ramakrishna order. So these great teachings in the Vedanta Society coming from Ramakrishna, but one of his main disciples, Vivekananda. And Ramakrishna Paramahamsa saying that the one has become the many. The one has become the many. So realizing that one behind everything, but also recognizing the many. He was a great bhakti, the yogi of devotion, extreme devotion, but deeply realized the non-dual understanding. He said, God alone has become everything. God alone has become everything. And just rest in that, these wonderful pointers. Ramana Maharshi says, there is only one consciousness. I look forward to investigating that some more today. The one consciousness instead of this possible idea that there are many consciousnesses. But Ramana is saying there is one consciousness. Ramana is saying the self alone exists. The self alone exists. In that non-dual understanding. In the end, we can't find a separateness. There's just the wholeness. So we might not be knowing that right now. That might not be our experience. We'll talk about with this teaching how it comes to be more and more our life here. I had a couple modern teachers, Eckhart Tolle saying, consciousness is the space in which everything happens. Consciousness is the space in which everything happens. The fundamentalness of consciousness. Muji, who awoke with Papaji, who came to know his true nature with Ramana. Muji says, and is a great modern teacher, awareness is the only constant. Everything comes and goes in that. And that's what we're talking about. That's what we keep talking about. The fundamentalness of that awareness. And so just spending more and more time with that, and then this wholeness just naturally appearing. freedom from suffering that the Buddha talked about, nirvana. So we also talk about that these misunderstandings are that sort of this veil. Sometimes it feels like a shell, and there can be a crack in it, and then the opening happens, and the crack can happen from some sort of a spiritual experience or something that happens, and then maybe the spiritual seeker is born, and share more about that. But so there's this veiling because of this identity that we take on. How does this identity happen? So there's this vast infinite consciousness, and then the child is born, and in that infant, sometimes we can see that vast infinite consciousness, especially the more that we're open to that. Of course, if we're very self-identified, personally identified, we feel that in the child, a projection, but the more that we're in this space of openness, the more that we see just that vast infinite consciousness shining through that infant. And then the infant is given a name. Yeah. The infant is protected. It's not safe. It's understandable. The mama bird takes care of the baby birds. It's understandable. The infant is taken care of. We're concerned. It's taught that it's not safe, that it needs to do things to be safe. Conditioning is coming in, and it's learning that it's an individual, and also experiencing is happening. It feels individual. Experiencing is happening in this body mind, right? So we have um, the sounds that are unique that are happening here, and the tastes and the thoughts, and it all feels unique here. So there's this birth of this being unique, needing protection. There's also the birth of doership in here, where it's taught that it needs to do certain things, that, even don't cross the road without looking, right? It's not safe. Do this, don't do that, clean up your room. It's all okay. But in this individual identity is happening, and this vastness that is always here from that infant throughout a life, right? As we've been discovering here today, throughout a life, that vastness, that presence, that awareness is always here. But that's not being taught as being important, and what's being taught as being important is this individual identity. And then the suffering comes, yeah, the psychological suffering. And a lot of that coming around this doership. So we've been talking some today about the identity as an individual, and this witnessing presence identity. And then also we can talk about this identity as the doer. And so it's implanted there, right? It's just part of society and part of part of the parents and teachers, this doership. You did good, you didn't do good. The coaches did good, you didn't do good, you should do it better, you did it well. But we've talked some here about the wonderful teaching that's been really emphasized by Ramesh Balsekar, and who was a translator for Nisargadatta Maharaj, and then did a lot of his own teaching. And there's other teachers now that have been teaching Ramesh's teachings. And he focused on this concept of doership and how we can understand it. And again, this is ancient. They talk about this in the Bhagavad Gita. The something about the soul deluded believes itself to be the doer or something like that. But the actions are actually coming from one's nature. But Ramesh focused on this a lot, and he said that our nature comes from our genetics and our conditioning. There's no control over the genetics. How this body happened, there was no control. This individual had no control over that. And then all this conditioning that happened, there was no control over that. The environment that it was raised in, the school that it went to, the community that was raised in, the country, the traditions, the way to think about the world, no control over that. And then I've talked about this example. I like this example of just the example of a office place unfolding where there's maybe there's an abuser and there's the one that's getting abused, and there's the different people in the meeting, and some people are going to want to step in and say, hey, take it easy on that guy, and somebody else is going to say, oh, he doesn't mean it, and somebody else is going to just not have it in them to be involved in the whole thing, and somebody's going to want to maybe talk to the abuser later, and all these different ways that everybody's conditioned, and we're going to see life as coming more from that, and see that we're coming from more of that, and see that the other is coming from more of that. And in this, we see this doership dissolving. This doership dissolving. Hatred and blame, it loses its footing. Pride and arrogance, it loses its footing. It will appear and, oh, well, that's silly. And then it just stops appearing. We realize that life is just unfolding, doing its thing. I had some nice doership metaphors. Gravity moving the river, right? The river doesn't say, I'm flowing, right? It is flowing to the ocean naturally, doing its thing naturally. Electricity, lighting up a light, lighting up a lamp. The lamp doesn't say, oh, I shine so brightly, or it might. If we anthropomorphize it some or something, the lamp is, I'm shining so brightly. It's the electricity moving through it, right? It's not doing it. It's just the electricity moving through it. We talked about the metaphor of the flute. The flute doesn't say, oh, I just played such a beautiful song. Right? There is the composer and the one that blew the air through the flute, the artist, and then the flute was part of it. Just like each body mind is an instrument in the unfolding. And there's so much dissolving that can happen of this false identity when we investigate this doership. So we do this as we feel even resistance to life. We can see if I'm feeling a moment of resistance to life inside me. I wish it wasn't that way. Is there some doership inside of that? Is there some false beliefs inside of that? So we're feeling this happening. And Ramesh would say at the end of the day, just think of something that you think you were completely in control of that you did. And look at that, see how it was just life unfolding, an event meeting with a conditioned. Here there's also just the absolutist part of it all. I mean, so much, but I'm sure with Ramesh as well, that he always said first primarily consciousness is everything. But seeing the lack of really a doer, that it's just that one's nature meeting the events that are coming in life, and that's where the actions are coming from. Just like in that meeting, where the actions are coming from. There's not needing to be like the other or not accepting the other. Everybody's coming from its nature, and it's not that a nature can't change, right? We call it the up-to-date conditioning. So the conditioning is definitely something that's changing over time, and that's something that happens with this teaching. Conditioning happening over time. And then life is met differently. Life is met differently. And I mean, just give a moment to the silence, the sweetness in every moment. I wanted to talk some about how life is meant differently and uh, dissolvings that can happen. And something that happens, we're talking about spiritual seekers, for example, is we call these peak experiences. So there's this amazing experience that we maybe have maybe we were at a retreat, or maybe we were just, who knows, having a really rough moment and it all fell apart. And there was just peace in that moment. And then there's a wanting to recreate this peak experience. I want that back. And this searching happens. And this is something that happens to a spiritual seeker and part of the birth of a spiritual seeker, and it's all fine. And wanting to have more of these peak experiences, but there's other guideposts for progress that I wanted to talk about, and it's this dissolving that can happen, and it's these different types of dissolving that can happen. And the first type of dissolving I wanted to talk about was the active mind. So this quieting in the mind. we say that the mind it has a nature of its own, and we feed it, and as we feed it, it keeps going, and it has a momentum. As we feed it, we keep that momentum going. But understanding the nature of doership, understanding and recognizing the witnessing presence, and it's just a recognizing, right? It's a recognizing of doership. So nothing needs to be fixed. It's just recognized. Oh, that's coming from there. Oh, this witnessing presence is still there, untouched. When the body is sick, when the body is healthy, same witnessing presence. Just observing. And this observing of thoughts, seeing thoughts arise and fall, there starts to become less of a connecting in with them, less of an identifying with them. And they're not being fed as much, and they lose their juice. The story of me loses its juice. And there's this quieting of the mind that happens. If you feel that happening in you, don't fret. And there's part of us, this mind part, that can worry about that. But we're going to say, okay, you're worrying, that's observed. But I've heard that it's okay. The mind is becoming more quiet. And when we look at how intelligently the Buddha, Ramakrishna, and Ramana communicated, it's not that we lose our mental faculty. Mental faculty is actually more capable as the mind is quieted, quiet, becomes more quiet. There's actually a intuitive nature that comes forward more. So we're meeting life from more of an intuitive space, following that more, and we're able to make decisions more clearly without being in this false identity, meeting what is really present, not with all these filters here. Really nice. So thoughts falling away more, dissolving more. Feel free to allow that to happen. We've kind of talked about seeking might fall away more. Before you knew yourself as a seeker, you had to read more books. You had to watch more YouTube videos, go on more retreats. Then we just allow the silence to have us at some point. Ramana, it just, not that anybody he's allowed the silence to take him so deeply and completely for years. But anyway, we can find that happening too. We could still be in our lives, but again, that silence, just taking more and more moments for that. And the seeking falling away some, it's okay. It becomes more of a deepening. A deepening can definitely still happen, and a clearing of the vessel can still happen. A rising of constrictions can still happen. Feeling separateness in a moment can still happen. But it's happening from a or it's happening not even from, but within. It happens within me. It's not me. Before, when sadness happens, we say, I'm sad. I'm sad. And then sadness is felt. What's sad here? I don't know. Sadness is felt. I am sad is an identification with the sadness. But it loses its ground. It's part of, we identify with that. And it is in this body mind where sadness is felt, right? I mean, there might be your friend is sad and then you feel sad. So maybe it was felt there and then it's felt here. But it happens within that. And then when it's happening within that, it's just seen and it loses its stickiness. How about I'm confused? Oh, I'm confused, I'm lost. Inside of presence, it's just the mind that's confused. In a moment, the mind didn't get a concept that was being shared. It's okay. It's not taken so seriously. Right? So things aren't taken so seriously. And so in that, this deepening happens. So an arising of just a clearing of the vessel. There's decades and decades of, I mean, for Ramana, when it happened to him, he was a teenager. So not decades and decades. And anyway, for most of us, decades and decades, and then these things will arise, but now they're arising in presence. So it's not as much of a seeking. I am lost, but now I am found. It's kind of inside of it all. So the seeking isn't there anymore. But a deepening can still be there. It's kind of what it turns into. Precious, precious deepening. And it might be a deepening, throughout this genetics, throughout the conditioning, throughout lifespans of society. It's allowed. Judgments can fall away. So, is this good and bad? And we've probably talked about this some as well. Judgments falling away. Just not being able to judge, not feeling that I'm in the position. Ramesh talked about it like the object in the painting, knowing why it was put there in the painting. This is a object in creation, the body mind, not knowing why, not needing to know why also happens. But so we talked about, like in the last meeting, about war. So these big, really tough things, I don't know. I don't know if it's supposed to be part of it. I don't know if there's some deep transformation that's happening within it. We talked about when you look at these awakening stories, you hear that the suffering that's happening in people is intense, and how this suffering gives birth to awakening and understanding. I'm not in a place to judge it. And also, what comes to me unasked is meant for me. That's a place of, even though it wasn't what I preferred, I'm not going to call it bad. It happened. This body had a ski accident and broke its collarbone a few years ago, and it was a tough few months. I couldn't take it as a negative. Inside of any of it, I couldn't take it as a negative. For some reason, that happened, that needed to happen. I couldn't take it as a negative. I'm right and you're wrong. Can't feel that. I don't even know. No, I can't feel that. That can fall away. Yeah, and the last thing I had on my list here was ownership. Ownership can fall away. My thought, my actions. We've kind of talked about that already. That's in that doership story. I didn't get into it that much about the thought piece of it, but we recognize that thoughts arise. We think that we are the thinker, but the ownership of the thought takes place afterwards. Thoughts arise on their own. The ownership of the thoughts just fall away. We can't take it. And then the doership, of course, so with ownership of actions. Then the ownership of this body, this life. Car, house. And it's okay. This body has a whatever name attached with the ownership, and if something needs to happen in life with the car, with the other, and there's relationships, and there's family and friends and connections, but it's not so sticky. It's there as part of it, but ownership can fall away. So as these things fall away, we're not going to struggle against it. The struggle against these things falling away is just part of the mind wanting to stay in control. For some reason, it likes that. Stay in control. It's really amazing. This false entity taking on so much power and creating so much delusion. But we're blessed that we have that opportunity to allow the wholeness to be here. So as these things fall away, this is a great sign, and feel free to welcome it. Allow it. I wanted to take a moment and just to talk about the importance of going beyond the conceptual. So this happens throughout time, where these great teachings happen and these great texts happen, and then within them, and these sages talking and saying, realizing that the words can't touch it, even though these words can be great pointers. In the end, don't hold on to the words. There's a Zen saying, the finger pointing at the moon is not the moon. So realizing these are pointers, but in the end, it's not going to be the focus. That's not what the understanding is meant to do. Adi Shankar Acharya, he was thought of as one of the fathers of non-duality, a great teacher, ancient teacher, saying that Brahman is beyond speech and mind. Words return from it, together with the mind not having attained it. The self cannot be described in words. So even though we point to it, we know that we're not really getting there. Meister Eckhart saying God is found in the silence. Meister Eckhart, a Christian mystic, centuries ago, not Eckhart Tolle, Meister Eckhart, Christian mystic realizing the non-dual reality. God is found in the silence. Ramana Maharshi, oh my gosh, how he loves silence. So just giving to that completely and knowing that silence was the ultimate teacher and saying that over and over, and definitely preferring to teach in the silence more than sharing the words, but sharing words when it felt necessary. He said silence is the most powerful form of teaching. It is the perfect teaching. Silence is the language of the self. What cannot be said can be shown in silence. The highest truth cannot be put in words. It can only be experienced. So giving ourselves to that silence more and more. So I'm sure it wasn't his intention, but I'm going to quote Swami Sarvapriyananda, who was just sharing some about consciousness again recently, and while I was watching him, he was teaching about this great non-dual text, the Avadhuta Gita, and he um, likes to teach about the Ashtavakra Gita. He loves to teach about so much, and I've heard him teach about that so much, but not the Avadhuta Gita. So I wanted to watch some of his sharing, and if you can watch him, he's so wonderful. He's he. There's hundreds of verses in the Avadhuta Gita, and I think he got through 5 of them in this 3 hour long sessions. This class that he was giving at the Hollywood Vedanta Center. So wonderful. So coming from the Ramakrishna order, and he at one point said, "So what is the truth?" Shh.